A new poll in America reveals a startling fact. Most Americans oppose the Patriot Act, used by the National Security Agency as a legal basis to spy on its own citizens. Despite this, the US government seems determined to use this law for just that purpose. It's a fact that no administration in US history has spied as closely as the Obama administration into the private lives of its own citizens. Repeated calls by American citizens for the repeal of the Patriot Act and the closure of the highly controversial National Security Agency, particularly since Edward Snowden revealed the extent of the agency's unconstitutional spying, have been ignored. In May 2015, the Federal Appeals Court ruled mass data collection was not legal, and the US Congress narrowly refused to sanction an extension of some powers. Yet American President Barack Obama still has vast authority to allow surveillance of calls to, from, and inside the US, as well as authorizing snooping in other digital communications. Many Americans now claim to distrust their own government. The US has been ridiculed around the world for using fear to justify spying on its own citizens and spending large sums on defense and on war. Is it really a good idea for a government to scare its citizens like that? We asked the American public.
I don't think it's a good idea to scare your citizens, because we as Americans, whatever, we look up to the government to protect us for everything. You know, the government is supposed to make sure that we have what we need. They need to make sure that we're secure, you know, and making us scared is like a lack of trust. Like, we feel like we can't trust the government. Anything, you know.
I think it depends. I think depending on the situation. But in general, I don't think it's good to scare the citizens. I think that there are other effective ways to get their agenda across. But no, I think scaring the citizens would make them act too rashly and not think about what their response should be. So yeah, I don't think it's a good idea in general.
No, I don't. Why would you want to scare the people that live here? It just makes no sense.
No, I don't think it's a good idea to scare your own citizens. After all, it's your citizens. You're supposed to be taking care of them, you know, providing for them. So fear is perhaps not the best way to utilize your power to ensure that you get the relevant information you need.
I don't think it's a good idea for anybody to try to scare anybody. What sort of world are we creating by scaring people?
I don't necessarily think that they're trying to scare the citizens. I think that it does scare certain citizens. But all in all, I support it. I think it's a good idea, because essentially if you have nothing to hide, then there's no reason to be worried. And all in all, it's to keep the citizens safe. So yeah, I don't think it's to scare anyone. I think it's to keep us safe, and I support it.
Those are the views of the American public. We asked our experts about the use of fear to justify spying on citizens and spending money on defense and war.
Well, if a government trusts its citizens, and that government's built on a system where the population has real democratic control, then no, it's a terrible idea for a government to scare its own citizens. But if that government is based on a wealthy elite who don't share the same concerns as the population in terms of, you know, economic or political concerns, well, then scaring its own citizens is only the one way that that government can retain power. The Patriot Act is one of many ways that the United States controls its citizens. There's a number of other scare tactics that they use as well. And we can see that quite clearly in the events that are unfolding in police brutality on a day-to-day basis, in the Black Lives Matter protests, in the Occupy protests, in Barack Obama signing in a legislation that allows military force in assassinating American citizens.
Perhaps it is a good idea that the United States government develops a strategy of putting fear into its citizens for this reason, that without intimidation, it's doubtful, without intimidation and repression, I should say, it's doubtful that the United States government could maintain its position of dominance, considering the way that increasing amount of citizens are becoming alienated in terms of its domestic and its foreign policies. So in a situation, the United States is faced with two options: either to develop an engagement with its citizens based on a critical dialogue towards justice or to develop more repression. And unfortunately for the citizens of the United States and the people of the world, the United States government is choosing to develop the latter, that is repression.
What is the real purpose of the Patriot Act? We asked the American public for their opinion.
I think the basis behind the act was to ensure that national security is preserved by getting the relevant information from your citizens, because there's so many people, so there will be a lot of information that is out there that can be relevant. But it's a very difficult situation. You could go either way in terms of that act.
To spy on people for security reasons, and I just don't think that's right. To go through people's things, and there's privacy that people have, that I think they have the right to have privacy.
So what I think that the Patriot Act would do is basically have a way for the country to keep their eyes on everyone, and basically whenever they get some intel about someone that might be a suspicious personnel, they can basically get their whole history together. And the Patriot Act allows them to essentially look through everything, look through all of their accounts, all of their phone records, all of their personal information, their emails and everything, all of their bank account information. Now, to a certain extent, that's all right, because they have a purpose behind it, which is maybe to stop terrorism or whatever. But then they also have to find a line that where they shouldn't cross it. There also has to be a line that they shouldn't cross in terms of invading privacy, and privacy is very important, especially to the people of this country.
I think it's the safety of American citizens in our soil. I think I don't think it's meant to harm anybody. I just think it's just taking good precaution, just in case. Yeah.
The Patriot Act is designed to spy on us, emails, phone calls, everything, and whatever they could get their hands on, basically no privacy at all.
The real purpose of the Patriot Act? I can't speak for the real purpose of the Patriot Act. My understanding is that the Patriot Act is designed to gather information on our citizens for our safety. It's all done in the name of safety. However, the government is infringing on our personal liberties by collecting this information, which isn't acceptable.
Can our experts clarify the true purpose of the Patriot Act?
The purpose of the Patriot Act is to undermine the rights granted to Americans in our Constitution. The Patriot Act is completely un-American in every single way. It allows for citizens to be stripped of their citizenship if they engage in civil disobedience. It allows for extended powers of spying on citizens for political and religious reasons. The attacks of the Patriot Act on our fundamental rights are done in the name of anti-terrorism, but the definition of terrorism is intentionally vague. It can be extended to people who engage in civil disobedience. So that means anyone who engaged in the civil rights movement or current civil rights activism could be targeted by the Patriot Act.
The real purpose of the Patriot Act is to use the instance or incident of 9/11 then to develop a much more profound and stronger counterintelligence strategies and tactics of the US government. Or to put more simply, it was an excuse for them to snoop much more greater and a deeper level, not only its own citizens, but also citizens across the world, including some of its primary allies, as we found out in the case of Germany.
A new poll shows that most Americans oppose the Patriot Act. Why do you think the mainstream media hasn't told you about this? That's the question we put to the American public.
That's a good question, because I didn't know about it. Well, I knew a little bit about it, but I think it goes back to scaring the citizens. I think that some people are scared about it. I don't really understand that, because if there's nothing to hide, I don't see why you should be scared. But I don't think that many citizens are educated enough about it. So I think if they knew what the whole act was, that there wouldn't be anything to be scared about to begin with.
Because they know people will be freaked out. Like me, knowing about it, I'm a little bit ticked off about it, because I don't like people in my business. I think you should be in people's business if they acting suspicious, if they acting like they're gonna do something crazy like bombers, then of course. But if these people doing regular stuff, is nothing suspicious, I don't think that they should have a right to have so much, control over us.
Then we wouldn't be on the media. If we knew that they were spying on us, then we wouldn't be on Facebook. We wouldn't be on these social medias, and they don't want that.
Well, the easy answer would be because it's the media, the ratings is all that matters, but, it depends on what ties they have with the government, which, obviously I don't know much about it, but I think the main reason would be so that they don't, step on the bad toes and get into trouble, I guess.
Who knows? Maybe the mainstream media wants to keep it a secret because they have affiliations with the government. I mean, they can be those reasons as well. Or it actually, I've read that as well, that a lot of people in the Patriot Act are not supportive of it because essentially it is an invasion of privacy. So I think that's maybe media outlets, the major ones are affiliated a lot with governmental stories, governmental institutions that don't want the word to get out, and maybe that's why they don't tackle the issues.
Well, I can't speak to that because I don't really follow mainstream media, so I can't say what they have delivered or what they haven't delivered, so I can't answer this question.
I'm not sure. I think that even though a lot of American citizens oppose it, I think that the government does not. So I think that the media doesn't necessarily want to let us know that the government really likes or is in favor of keeping the Patriot Act a thing.
What is the actual reason the mainstream media hasn't reported the hostility to the Patriot Act? Can our experts shed light on this?
Well, the majority of the American media is owned by a wealthy elite. And the Patriot Act helps protect their position. So why would they report on anything that could threaten the Patriot Act? Now, there is an exception to this. There are news outlets in the United States that are, progressively run. They're run by smaller organizations that do report on it. And there is, of course, our nationally owned news outlets as well, like the Public Broadcasting Company, National Public Radio. And those reflect less of the interests of corporations, but they still are affected by them.
There's many things that mainstream media do not tell us about the population of the United States and their cultural and political opinions and positions on things. So it's no surprise to me that the mainstream media has not mentioned to hardly anyone to audiences, that the majority of the citizens of the United States oppose the Patriot Act. The United States, even in its mainstream culture amongst its population, they believe in this concept of the kind of the working class made success, and so it's very individualistic and it's very atomized in that regard. So there's a very strong anti-state, anti-government sentiment across the people of the United States. That has some negatives to its positives, but that is one of the main contributory reasons why the citizens of the United States government are wholly hostile, really, to the Patriot Act.
It's widely believed that the Patriot Act is used by the National Security Agency to spy on people. Why have so many Americans lost trust in US government and security agencies? We asked the public.
I think it's, the fact of having freedom means you can do what you want, have your own personal space. So I can understand why people have a problem if anyone is spying on them, if you're taking the information which is belonging to them and only to them and should be to them. But, I guess in times of tough situations, it's a very, very hard situation to assess what is right and wrong.
Because, like I said before, we're not able to be free and do what we want without having all this eyes on us, eyes and ears in our conversations and stuff. And, it's not good. It's just not good. Like, I think it should be limited, like a limit to all of that. It shouldn't be like...
I think there's a lot of secrets that are in the government. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think that there are certain things that don't need to be broadcasted. I think people read a little more into it than they have to.
Well, I think that there has been lots of things that have been covered up by the government. like the past with Hillary Clinton and Benghazi and all that issues. I think that has kind of hurt our trust in the government, that they kind of have to prove themselves to let us know what's going on, let us know about security, because that, I know, is important to a lot of American citizens. I think it's important for us to know, are we safe? Are you doing the things that need to be done to protect our country?
Because at the end of the day, how can they trust someone that's constantly watching them 24/7? So it's, that's the answer. That's what I can say. So how can you trust someone that's constantly watching you, can pull up your records whenever they want to, that you feel like you have no sense of privacy, because, I can say something and there could be a camera here or a recorder here that'll catch it, and that's it. Then the government knows about everything.
Well, I think that the reason that most Americans have lost trust in their government is because the government's violated their trust. We do something in the name of X, but really we're doing it in the name of Y.
Because they're being spied on by the government. So if the government doesn't trust you, why would you trust the government?
Is the use of the Patriot Act as a reason to spy on people one factor in the loss of trust in the American government? We turned to our experts for their views.
So the post-9/11 fear and the relentless flag waving is pretty much worn off by now. Americans aren't seeing terrorism or Muslims as a day-to-day threat anymore. And what they're seeing continually on the news now is images of police brutality, is police attacking protesters, is overall suppression of any type of resistance to the status quo. So Americans are really starting to question these laws and if they're actually there to protect them. And there's a classic mantra that if, I don't do anything wrong, the Patriot Act isn't going to harm me. But we're really beginning to see now that that's not the case at all.
They're complex and they're contradictory factors at play. But overall and broadly, we can understand that as the United States system and state goes deeper into crisis, the more it alienates its citizens. And the alienation of citizens is not exactly the same. It has the same roots and causes, but the responses, the political responses of the citizens can be quite different. So you have the Tea Party phenomenon, which was a right-wing mass movement, a racist, a nationalistic right-wing mass movement. But also then you have the growing radicalization of the left forces and the black and brown political forces as well. So these are some of the reasons why that there is a growing distrust and alienation of the citizens of the United States to the US government.
We asked the public if they want the mainstream media to be honest and open about government use of personal details and to campaign against government spying. Here's what they said.
Of course, because we need them to be honest with us, even though we know that they're not always completely honest and they're not always going to tell us the truth. I feel like it's important for the people to know what is going on in their lives, like what is happening every time they go on social media. They need to know the truth.
I certainly want our media to be honest, but I'm not sure if I want them to campaign against our government spying. I don't know if it is spying, but I don't know if that has a negative connotation to it. I don't think it's negative necessarily. I think that they have the good in mind for everybody. I mean, I would rather them look at my emails and me not be a terrorist than to look at a terrorist's emails and they would catch them, So I think as long as you have nothing to hide, it's personal, yeah, but if you have nothing to hide, you shouldn't be worried.
I don't ever think that media should campaign against the government. But I mean, unless something is like actually wrong, but I support this act, so I don't support the campaigning against it. But I think that the media should definitely be honest. I think that everyone should look to the media and try to educate themselves on what's going on. So if they're being honest and telling the full truth, I think that that's okay.
Yes, I think they should be backing the citizens because that's what they should be doing. Their job is to provide the information to the citizens and be for the citizen and not the government. That's the whole point of journalism, and that's the professionalism point of it. But at the same time, they should be looking at it as what's best for the country as well. The security of the nation. So even if there's few citizens that are against it and they don't think it's the right thing, the media's job should be taking the right situation, what is better for the whole.
Well, I definitely think that awareness should be raised regarding the government's use of our information and what exactly they're doing. I think that the media could do a tremendous job at spreading that awareness. Are they doing it now? I don't know. And I think that it is, the responsibility of the media to be forthright and, open about what's actually going on. And, from my experiences with mainstream media, I can say that they usually aren't. So I think definitely a policy of openness and honesty from all news sources is definitely wanted from me. Yeah.
Yes, I need to know what's going on. I watch the news all the time. So if the news could inform me about the things that I don't know about, even better for me. Not knowing and then finding out at the last minute is like very deceitful in some sense. Like, I'd rather know. If somebody got the information, let me know what's going on. I need to know because this is my private matter, you know what I mean? So.
What do our experts say regarding the arguments in favour of honesty and openness in the media about the government's use of personal details and about government spying?
Well, of course, I'd like mainstream news channels to campaign against government spying and to be open about how my details are being used, but they won't because they reflect the powers of a wealthy elite. And the Patriot Act is another layer of protection of that wealthy elite. The only people who can and will campaign against the Patriot Act are everyday Americans.
It would be great if mainstream media was supporting the rights of citizens against being snooped on by the US state, but then that would assume that the mainstream media actually objectively reports on issues and reports on issues in the interests of its audiences. It doesn't. Mainstream media is controlled by powerful interests who are running these media institutions. So it will be media institutions who are more critical in relation to US policy, who have a vested interest, much more than the Western mainstream, in actually bringing to light some of these injustices. So rather than relying on the mainstream media of the West and in the West, it's much more conducive to a more balanced understanding of these phenomenon if we go to those media platforms that have a much more critical approach to the West.
America has been ridiculed around the world for using fear to justify spying on its own citizens and spending fortunes on defence and on war. Indeed, political historians and analysts have claimed these are both cornerstones in American foreign policy. Washington can talk all it wants about civil liberties, but as long as it continues to pass legislation such as the Patriot Act, then its critics can easily highlight a huge gap in two things the US preaches but does not practice: freedom and democracy.